We all know Walt Disney, the dreamer who brought us Mickey Mouse and fairy tale castles. But the stories behind closed doors tell another tale. His private notes reveal unsettling truths. A guest welcomed with open arms, tied to the darkest parts of history. Anti-communist fervor that reached beyond mere patriotism. A movie that painted the South in a dangerously cheerful light. As he simply a man of his time or something more? These notes reveal choices and connections that hint at a darker, hidden side of the empire's creator. In 1928, 27-year-old Walt Disney sat on a train after a disappointing business meeting. With a pencil in hand, he began to sketch, unknowingly creating a character that would forever change the way people viewed a certain little rodent. Above his drawing, he wrote the name Mortimer Mouse. When he showed it to his wife, Lily, she laughed and suggested, "Walt, Mortimer isn't quite right. How about Mickey?" Walt smiled, agreeing that Mickey was perfect. This charming moment in American history marks the beginning of an icon. But at that time, Walt Disney faced significant challenges and some darker chapters in his life. Did you know he once attended a Nazi meeting and later welcomed a key figure close to Adolf Hitler to his studio? Today, we'll explore Walt's story, the good and the troubling aspects. But first, let's look at the side of Walt that brought so much joy to generations, much like the characters he brought to life. Walt Disney was born on December 5, 1901, to Elias, an Irish-American, and Flora, a German-American. It was on a farm in Marceline, Missouri, when Walt was only 4, that his talent for drawing first appeared. He drew a horse that belonged to a neighbor and soon began copying the work of newspaper cartoonist Ryan Walker. His parents proudly noticed his budding talent, but Walt's early years were tough. By junior high, he was waking up at 4:30 a.m. to deliver newspapers, a job that made school difficult for him. Life was far from easy, yet young Walt kept drawing and dreaming. Despite struggling with poor grades, Walt Disney never gave up on his passion for drawing. He enrolled in a cartooning course at the Kansas City Art Institute, nurturing his talent. Another love of his during that time was the world of motion pictures, those black and white films that made dreams come alive. When World War I broke out in 1917, Walt felt a deep sense of patriotism. Though he attended night classes at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, he dreamed of joining the U.S. Army and heading to Europe. Being too young, he forged a birth certificate and got a job as an ambulance driver for the Red Cross. By the time he reached France, the war had ended. His service ended up being more artistic than military. He drew sketches on the sides of ambulances. One of those drawings appeared in Stars and Stripes magazine, hinting that Walt's career was already moving in the right direction. Walt's path as a cartoonist seemed set. Interestingly, despite his later associations with some American figures who supported the Nazis, Walt had once been eager to confront Europe's villains. His relationships later in life would become complex, but back then, he was just a determined young artist. At 18, Walt faced a setback when he was let go from Pesman Rubin Commercial Art Studio. Another aspiring artist, Uwe Iwerks, was also let go at the same time. This turned out to be a blessing. The two formed a partnership that would shape the future of animation. Walt was the visionary, while Iwerks, the son of German immigrants, was a meticulous and talented artist. Iwerks worked tirelessly, sometimes without sleep, creating sketches that turned Walt's ideas into reality. It was intense work for one person, but it laid the foundation for what was to come. Walt Disney shifted his focus from static drawings to animation, leading to a contract for creating Newman's Laughograms. He formed a studio using funds from a brief project called the Iwerks Disney Commercial Artists Venture and began producing simple cartoons like Jack the Giant Killer. Although basic by today's standards, these animations were impressive at the time. At 21, Walt and his brother Roy, who had just recovered from tuberculosis, started their own company, the Disney Brothers Studio. This business would eventually evolve into the Walt Disney Company, now valued at over $200 billion, with annual earnings of around $67 billion. Walt brought Iwerks on board, and they set up shop in Hollywood. At 24, Walt married Lillian, an artist working as an inker, and together they had a daughter and later adopted another. In 1927, Walt created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, a character that marked a leap forward in animation. Unlike earlier creations, Oswald moved with human-like fluidity, showcasing the potential of modern animation. However, after a successful run, Disney lost the rights to Oswald and had to think of a new character. Drawing inspiration from Oswald, Walt came up with Mortimer Mouse. Over time, this character would evolve into the beloved Mickey Mouse. Years later, Walt would famously say, "I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse." Fun fact, Mickey's original high-pitched voice was Walt Disney's own. However, he eventually had to stop due to the damage to his vocal cords from years of smoking. In 1928, Mickey Mouse truly came to life in the animated short Steamboat Willie. The cartoon was an instant hit, charming audiences of all ages. With iWorks leading the animation team and Disney's creative direction, Mickey quickly captured hearts. The excitement grew when Disney added sound to the Mickey Mouse cartoons, a groundbreaking move at a time when talkies were the latest innovation. Soon, Mickey had company. In the 1930s, his sweetheart, Minnie, was introduced, followed by his loyal pet, Pluto the Bloodhound, in 1931. But Disney wasn't done. He wanted more characters to add to the mix. In 1934, an always cheerful duck made his debut in The Wise Little Hen, marking the first appearance of Donald Duck. By then, Disney, still only in his early 30s, had become a major figure in entertainment. His studio had grown to employ over 200 people, and the golden age of animation was underway. Always looking forward, Disney began exploring the idea of feature-length animated films. This ambition led to the creation of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937. Snow White was a massive success, earning $6.5 million at the box office, which would be about $127 million today. It became the highest-grossing film at that time and solidified Disney's reputation. With this triumph, Disney immediately moved on to new projects like Pinocchio and Fantasia, cementing his legacy even further. Life seemed perfect for Walt Disney. However, across the ocean, Adolf Hitler was gaining influence, speaking of the Jewish problem and stirring unrest among the people of Germany. War was brewing, and unexpectedly, Walt Disney would find himself entangled in the complex politics of that era. Let's switch gears and look at the less discussed side of Disney. During World War II, Disney contributed to the Allied efforts by creating an anti-Nazi cartoon titled Der Führer's Face, originally called A Nightmare in Naziland. In this short film, Donald Duck finds himself in a nightmare where he plays a Nazi, only to wake up relieved that it was just a bad dream. As the war ended, Disney's political leanings became more conservative. While there's nothing inherently wrong with conservatism, after all, some values are worth preserving, Disney's strong anti-communist stance raised eyebrows. Given the devastation Joseph Stalin caused, being wary of communism wasn't surprising. But questions arose about whether Disney's motivations were purely ideological or had a personal twist. The Red Scare was sweeping through America, turning into a tense period of suspicion. While some targeted were genuinely subversive, many were merely progressive thinkers hoping for a fairer society. J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, was a central figure in this era. He fueled anti-communist hysteria, leading to the restriction of free speech, something that rarely ends well. The movement often targeted labor activists, a stance that benefited business owners, including Disney. Hoover was known for being divisive, labeled by some as a racist, a bigot, and a homophobe. He worked to undermine the civil rights movement and figures like Martin Luther King Jr. Interestingly, Hoover shared a close relationship with Disney. In fact, Disney appeared before the House Un-American Activities Committee and testified against former employees, labeling them as communists. One of them was a former Disney animator. In that era, being accused of communism could ruin lives. For Disney's cooperation, Hoover appointed him as a full special agent in charge contact in 1954. While this doesn't cast Disney as some kind of tyrant, it does shed light on his mindset and the company he kept. During that period, there were isolationists in the U.S. who spoke against both war and communism, and some went as far as discussing what they called the Jewish problem, an idea infamously promoted by Hitler. Among these figures was Henry Ford, the car manufacturing giant known for his strong anti-Semitic views. Ford and Disney were close friends, sparking questions about whether Disney shared any of Ford's beliefs. Hold that thought as we explore more. Was Disney as anti-Semitic as Ford? That's a question that has puzzled many. On one hand, Disney did contribute to Jewish charities, and some of his friends vouched that he did not seem anti-Semitic. Yet, critics point out the company he kept. The first researcher granted access to Disney's archives concluded that, while Disney himself may not have been anti-Semitic, he willingly allied himself with people who were. This same researcher noted that Disney enthusiastically associated with anti-Semites. On the flip side, a Jewish composer who collaborated with Disney called the idea that he was anti-Semitic absolutely preposterous. The reality is layered. Take, for example, the original Three Little Pigs cartoon. In it, the big bad wolf disguises himself as a Jewish peddler, speaking Yiddish, and depicted with exaggerated features like a long nose, black beard, and traditional kaftan. This portrayal mirrored the kind of anti-Jewish propaganda used by the Nazis. Although Disney later removed this portrayal when the cartoon was re-released in 1948, some argue this change was made only because of potential backlash from Jewish communities, especially in the wake of the Holocaust. It's worth noting that the original imagery closely resembled Nazi caricatures, raising legitimate concerns about Disney's judgment at the time. We also need to consider some incidents that cast Disney in a troubling light. There are claims that he attended pro-Nazi gatherings held by the German-American Bund, an American Nazi group. Animator Art Babbitt, who worked with Disney, said, "I saw Walt Disney and Gunther Lessing, Disney's lawyer, at these meetings, alongside notable Hollywood figures with Nazi leanings. Disney showed up regularly. This wasn't a case of stumbling into the wrong meeting by accident. These gatherings were openly aligned with Nazi ideology, full of racist and anti-Semitic rhetoric. Disney would have been exposed to these sentiments frequently. Did he share these beliefs? Then there's the story of Leni Riefenstahl's visit to Disney's studios in 1938. Riefenstahl, a well-known film director, was admired by Hitler for producing 3 major propaganda films for the Nazi regime. She once described watching Hitler give a speech as an awe-inspiring moment, likening it to a powerful force shaking the earth. While her films didn't overtly promote anti-Semitism, they celebrated Nazi ideals. After World War II, her reputation suffered despite her claims that she had been unaware of Hitler's genocidal plans. She later reflected that meeting him was the biggest catastrophe of my life. However, this didn't change the fact that when Disney welcomed her and gave her a tour, she held strong Nazi beliefs. After her visit, Riefenstahl commented on how proper Americans distanced themselves from what she called Jewish smear campaigns. Although this doesn't prove that Disney shared her views, it does show that he was willing to associate with someone who had close ties to Hitler. Whether Disney agreed with these beliefs or not, his interactions raised questions about his stance on Nazism and anti-Semitism. Disney's kind treatment of Riefenstahl could have been due to their shared passion for filmmaking. Some have suggested that it was also possibly a strategic move to regain access to German audiences after Hitler banned Hollywood films, claiming they were controlled by the Jews. Stepping away from this, what about Disney's views on race, specifically regarding African Americans? Were his films light-hearted entertainment, or did they carry offensive depictions of people with darker skin? In Disney's era, many black activists argued that his work did contain racist stereotypes. The most controversial was Song of the South, which continues to spark criticism today. Modern Disney leadership distances itself from the film, and for good reason. One summary of the film described it as depicting a plantation full of cheerful slaves eager to serve their masters. Another critic called it one of Hollywood's most persistently offensive depictions of race, while others saw it as a dangerously romanticized version of slavery. It's clear Disney wasn't striving for realism, and many believe it was an insult to American minorities. But does this mean Walt Disney was racist, or was he simply unaware when he should have been more considerate of societal standards and others' feelings? The historian with access to Disney's archives didn't see him as a racist. He noted, Walt Disney was no racist. He never, in public or private, made negative comments about black people or promoted white superiority. However, like many white Americans of his generation, he was racially insensitive. While this rings true, it's also worth noting that Disney did support a black actor receiving an honorary Academy Award. Floyd Norman, Disney's first black animator, offered insight into the man he worked for. Norman said, "I never saw even a hint of the racist behavior Walt Disney was accused of after his death. His treatment of people, everyone, was always exemplary." Disney's legacy is complex, marked by insensitivity in some areas, but also moments of fairness and inclusivity. Did Disney try to gloss over the dark reality of plantations with that movie? Ignoring such a painful history isn't ideal, but it doesn't mean he agreed with or condoned those past atrocities. While Disney was known for having a utopian vision, portraying an unrealistic version of history was a definite misstep. Disney's legacy continues to be debated today. Meryl Streep once said Disney had some racist tendencies, supported an anti-Semitic industry group, and was a gender bigot. The question of whether we should add sexism to Disney's reputation is worth exploring. An animator and friend of Disney's mentioned he didn't trust women or cats. In a 1938 letter to a woman applying for a job, Disney himself wrote, "Women do not do creative work," suggesting only roles like inking or painting were suitable for women. This mindset was not unusual for the time, but it certainly reveals a sexist aspect to Disney's character. Before he passed in 1966, Disney was working on an ambitious project, the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, EPCOT. This concept was more than just an idea. It was his vision of an ideal community, free from poverty and unemployment, a place without slums. It was meant to be a perfect town, with a single, strong leader at the helm, reminiscent of a utopian dream with a touch of autocracy. Disney spoke passionately about Epcot, saying, "It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and systems. And Epcot will always be a showcase to the world for the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise." While this vision highlighted innovation and progress, it also showed Disney's desire for control and order, reflective of his complex views. To connect all the dots and label Disney as a villain is tricky. It's easy to brand someone as far left or far right, especially when out-of-context quotes spread on social media. It's rarely that straightforward, and when it is, it's obvious. For Disney, apart from his open disdain for labor unions, most of his flaws were not crystal clear. The launch of Disneyland was a story in itself. Walt Disney put everything into building his dream park, uncertain if it would be a hit or a flop. The answer came quickly when the park opened in 1955 to chaos. The event was invite-only, with tickets sent to Disney's friends and celebrities. But counterfeit tickets flooded in, and the crowd swelled to double what was expected. Traffic jammed for miles, food and drink sold out fast, rides kept breaking down, and on a scorching 100-degree day, most of the water fountains failed. What many saw as a disaster revealed just how popular the park would become. But trouble at Disney parks didn't end there. Epcot Center was designed as an educational experience, exploring world culture and the future. Over time, thrill rides were added to make it more exciting. One in particular was Mission Space, a high-tech simulator that launched in 2004, simulating a journey to Mars. Its intensity caught visitors off guard, making it clear that even in the happiest place on Earth, things could still go awry. In its first year, nearly 2 200 guests on the mission. Space Ride felt ill and needed paramedics. 2 tragic deaths occurred after riding it. One was a child with an undiagnosed heart condition, and the other was a German woman with existing health problems. Although investigations showed the ride was not directly responsible and was safe for most visitors, these events left people uneasy. Disney responded by introducing a less intense version of the ride to calm concerns. However, one classic ride didn't survive its history of incidents. The Skyway, an early gondola attraction that offered scenic views of the park, faced several issues. Though the ride itself was generally safe, accidents still happened. At Disneyland, a man fell 20 feet from a gondola, landing in front of the Alice in Wonderland ride. He sued Disney, claiming the ride was unsafe, but later admitted he had jumped out. Over at Disney World, a worker was hit by an unsecured gondola when the ride suddenly moved. He fell and sustained minor injuries. The most serious incident happened in 1999, when a 65-year-old custodian fell while cleaning a Skyway car. His injuries were fatal, and Disney faced a substantial fine. The series of accidents led to the eventual closure of the Skyway ride, as it was deemed too risky to continue. Splash Mountain is a fan-favorite Disney ride, known for its fun log flume adventure and cheerful singing animals. Riders follow the story of Brer Rabbit as he tries to outwit Brer Fox and Brer Bear, ending in a thrilling drop. But there's a reason you won't find much Splash Mountain merchandise or see its original movie source anywhere. The ride is based on Song of the South, a Disney film the company has completely distanced itself from. Released in 1946 and praised initially, the movie is now viewed as offensive and full of racial stereotypes. It portrays an overly romanticized version of life in the South during the Reconstruction era. Because of this, Disney has pulled it from circulation, and it's not on Disney+. The big question is, why did Disney decide to base an entire ride on this film in the 1980s? No one really knows. However, Splash Mountain is now being reimagined with a theme from The Princess and the Frog, likely to make it more marketable and inclusive. Opening new Disney parks can come with unexpected obstacles. While the parks in California and Florida were instant hits, the company faced a different story with Euro Disneyland in Paris. French intellectuals saw it as a blatant display of American consumerism, and local farmers disrupted the construction as part of a protest over trade issues. The backlash was so intense that one newspaper even joked about setting fire to the park. Despite protests, Euro Disneyland opened, but was far from successful at first. The French public showed little interest, and the park struggled. It took years for it to gain traction, eventually rebranding as Disneyland Paris and finding its place. The rough start taught Disney a lesson in being cautious about where and how it expands globally. Disney once faced its toughest backlash in an unexpected place, Virginia. The company planned a massive expansion with a new theme park called Disney's America in Haymarket, not far from a major Civil War battlefield. This park would focus on American history and expand on Epcot's educational themes. Disney even chose a site and planned a significant investment of over $500 million, a huge sum in the early 1990s. But they soon hit a wall of fierce opposition. Locals feared Disney would overshadow historical sites and hurt other tourist spots. The project took a hit when Euro Disney struggled in 1994, making Disney more careful about big investments. Another issue was Virginia's cold winters, which would force the park to close for months. The last straw came when Disney tried moving the idea to California at the site of Knott's Berry Farm, only for the owners to refuse to sell. In the end, Disney's America became the grand Disney project that never saw the light of day. But perhaps the most intriguing secrets lie with Walt Disney himself. Known for fiercely protecting his company, Disney's actions sometimes went too far. During the making of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, he hired actress and singer Adriana Caselotti for the voice of Snow White. She was a fresh face in Hollywood, with experience as a chorus girl, and her performance was a hit. It seemed like this would launch her career, but that didn't happen. Disney, wanting to keep the illusion of Snow White alive, reportedly blocked her from getting other roles. Caselotti wasn't even credited in the movie. While she faded from Hollywood's spotlight, she's now recognized as the voice that made Snow White a classic.